Last time we said computing has become a strategic resource, like oil, and that the giants, the US and China, are racing to control it. But they're not the only players. Today, the surprising ones, El Salvador, Colombia, and Brazil, quietly fighting to own a piece of the future. How does a small country turn volcanoes, geography, or cheap power into leverage in the AI age? And why might compute sovereignty, owning your own computing instead of renting it, become one of the defining fights of the next decade? Let's follow the power and the money south. This matters because, so far, most of the world just rents its computing from a handful of American and Chinese cloud giants. Your data, your AI, your digital economy running on someone else's machines in someone else's country under someone else's laws. That dependence is starting to feel dangerous. So nations are asking, what if we hosted our own? What if we built compute here, on our soil, powered by our energy, and even sold it to our neighbors? That's compute sovereignty, and for parts of the global south, it's a shot at owning the future instead of just consuming it. So what does compute sovereignty actually mean? Simply, control over the computing your country runs on, where the data centers sit, who owns them, whose laws govern the data, and whether you can keep running if a foreign supplier cuts you off. It's the digital version of energy independence. Renting compute from abroad is cheap and easy, until it isn't. Prices can jump, access can be cut for political reasons, and your most sensitive data lives under a foreign government's reach. For a country with ambitions, depending entirely on outsiders for the engine of the modern economy is a real vulnerability. But building your own compute is hard. It takes energy, money, geography, and chips. So the interesting thing is how 3 Latin American countries are each playing a totally different card. One has power, one has position, and one has scale. Let's take them one at a time. Start with the boldest, El Salvador. It's a small country, but it's sitting on a superpower, volcanoes. Beneath its ground is intense geothermal heat, and it has learned to turn that heat into cheap, clean, around-the-clock electricity. It literally runs on volcano power. El Salvador already used that volcanic power for something famous, mining Bitcoin, running energy-hungry computers off geothermal energy since 2021. Now the ambition is bigger. Take that same cheap, clean, constant power and point it at AI computing, volcanoes, into compute. And it's genuinely clever because clean, constant, cheap power is exactly what an AI data center craves. Remember, energy is the whole ballgame. Most countries have to build that power. El Salvador just has to tap what's already boiling under its feet. That's a rare natural advantage. Now, honestly, the big AI data centers are still more ambition than reality there for now, and a small country faces real limits on scale and expertise. But the logic is sound, the power is real, and the bet is bold. Volcano-powered compute is no longer a joke, it's a strategy. Next, Colombia and its card is geography. In computing, distance is time. The farther your data has to travel, the more delay, that latency we keep meeting. And Colombia happens to sit in a sweet spot close to the United States and wired straight into it by undersea fiber optic cables. How close? A signal from Colombia can reach the US in a few tens of milliseconds, blink of an eye fast. For a lot of digital services, that's close enough to feel local to American users, while sitting in a country with cheaper land, labor, and power. That's a powerful combination. This is the nearshore play. Be the low-latency, lower-cost backyard to a giant market. Colombia can host computing that serves both its own region and the US next door, a bridge between the two, earning money and building expertise by sitting in exactly the right place on the map. It's a reminder that in this race, you don't only win with volcanoes or billions of dollars. Sometimes you win with location, being milliseconds from where the demand is. Geography, which countries can't change, quietly becomes one of the most valuable assets they own. Then there's Brazil, and its card is simply size. Brazil is the giant of the region, the biggest economy, the biggest population, and by far the largest data center market in Latin America. When it comes to actually having computing on the ground, Brazil is already the regional heavyweight. Its business hub, Sao Paulo, has become the place where the internet of the region physically lives, where the cables meet and the servers hum. If data in much of South America needs a home, there's a good chance it already sleeps in Brazil. Scale made concrete. And Brazil has the other thing data centers crave lots of energy, much of it from hydroelectric dams. Abundant, relatively clean power plus a huge domestic market means Brazil can keep growing its compute without asking anyone's permission. Scale feeds on itself. To be precise, Brazil leads Latin America, not the world. The US and China are still in a different league entirely. But leading your region is exactly how you become the natural home for its data, its cloud, and its slice of the AI economy. Regional king is a strong hand. Step back, and you see three different countries turning what they already have heat, location, size into leverage in the most important race of the century. None of them can outspend the superpowers. So instead, each is playing its own unfair advantage. That's not desperation, that's strategy. And the prize is real jobs, investment, expertise, and a seat at the table of the digital future instead of forever being a customer of it. When the world runs on compute, hosting compute means the money and the power flow toward you, not just away from you. There's also dignity and security in it. A country that hosts its own compute keeps its data under its own laws and can't be so easily switched off from abroad. In a world where computing is power, growing your own is a quiet declaration of independence. But let's be honest about the walls, and the biggest one is chips. You can have all the volcano power and perfect geography on Earth, but the advanced processors that run modern AI are made by only a tiny handful of companies, and they're increasingly controlled, restricted, and fought over. So a country can own the building, the power, and the land, and still depend on foreign chips to fill it. True compute sovereignty runs straight into a chip choke point that even rich nations struggle with. Power and position get you far, but not all the way, not yet. And there's more. The huge upfront money, building reliable power grids, training enough skilled engineers, and staying politically stable enough that investors trust you for decades. These are hard, slow, unglamorous problems. Compute sovereignty is a marathon, not a headline. So why should you care, wherever you're watching from? Because if only two superpowers control the world's computing, the future gets decided by two governments. If dozens of countries can host meaningful compute, that power spreads out. And a more multipolar digital world is a more resilient, less controllable one. And it's a genuine shift in the story. For a long time, technology flowed one way, invented in a few rich countries, consumed everywhere else. Watching El Salvador, Colombia, and Brazil bid to host and export compute is watching that old one-way street start to open up in both directions. So what should you actually watch? First, energy. Whoever has cheap, clean, reliable power has the foundation, so watch geothermal, hydro, and solar deals, not just tech announcements. In this race, a power plant can matter more than a press release. Second, watch the chips and the cables. Who gets access to advanced processors, and where the new undersea fiber lands. Those two choke points, silicon and connectivity, will quietly decide which of these bold bets actually turns into real, humming, money-making compute. And third, watch the patterns spreading. El Salvador, Colombia, and Brazil are early, but the logic, turn your local advantage into hosted compute, works anywhere with power, position, or scale. Expect more countries to start playing this exact game, and soon. So here's the one thing to remember. In the age of AI, computing is power, and power doesn't only belong to the biggest players. A small country with volcanoes, a well-placed one with fiber, a big one with dams, each is turning what it has into a claim on the future. If this gave you a new way to see the map, subscribe. The future is being built in places you're not looking. This one we made in English, Spanish, and Portuguese because it's a story for our whole hemisphere. Wherever you're watching from, thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.